You've heard the song, right? The bears are eating my friends.
I have not heard that one.
No.
Female bears are ripping off my limbs.
Well, recorded live from council chambers of 95th Lutheran Church, it's the Roll for Joy cast, where we quest in order to play our way to a world of holy wholeness.
I'm your host, Rory, using pronouns like he and him, and serving as your Dungeon Master Pastor.
I'm your host, Alex, using pronouns like they and them, and serving as your paladin of play.
And I'm your host, Anthony, using pronouns like he and him, serving as your battle map boss.
Today is episode 8, where we get a visit from the Roll for Joy Steward of Lore, Pastor Ben Loven, and hear about his actual play podcast, The Lore of Jesus, Roll for Discipleship.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Ben.
Good to be here with the rest of the crew.
Welcome back, Ben.
Welcome back.
Okay, let's roll initiative and meet the players at the table. Everybody, let's roll for your order.
Oh, so close.
See, I even
14.
have a blue die for my blue color. Oh, that didn't pay off.
Anybody get a 20 or above? 19. 19 for Rory?
No, I got 5.
You have 5. Okay. Anybody get lower than 5? I did. I rolled a 2. 2, 5. Who else? What else we got? Ben, what you get?
I got a 9.
You got a
I
9?
got a 14.
We're all rolling real high this evening. So, Anthony, here's the backstory question of the day. Who is your favorite stereotypical church character? And by this, I mean at every church, if you had an adventuring party, there's specific roles that people show up in. Who might that character be to you?
The overenthusiastic door greeter. The overenthusiastic door greeter. The person who's such a morning person on top of everything else. And they're just so happy to see you and they're so excited. And there are mornings I have come to church and I have not had coffee yet. How are you awake? I'm barely functional.
Well, that's your favorite?
Yes, absolutely. No, because they're a big day brightener, It's just one of those things that's you know what? I kind of need that this morning. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you.
All right. Ben, who is your favorite stereotypical church character?
My favorite stereotypical church character, I would say, would probably be the person who is always perpetually on backup for coffee fellowship. They haven't been asked to do this role, but they are just always there. And if they see that there's an opening or they get here and realize the coffee is not going, they just step up and do it. That person is just great. They just help to make everything go and help to make sure that everyone has their fellowship time after worship. Rory, who is your favorite stereotypical church character?
Yeah, there are many, but I think one that's standing out to me is the old curmudgeon-y person that has a heart of gold. That person that is on the surface, they look grumpy all the time, and then when you get in conversation, there's just this twinkle in their eye and they crack a joke. We had this person, I'm thinking of a couple different people that kind of fit this dynamic. One person he after his wife died, he would always show up at church with a different name tag, and the name tag would be some ridiculous pun, the Simpsons would call in to the bar, sort of a thing, and it was I leaned over. was one. So his talent. We had a talent show, and he brought name tags for everybody, which was funny. That's one. The curmudgeon who has actually a heart of gold and kind of a sense of humor. Alex, who is your favorite stereotypical church character?
There are so many, and for me, it's a tie between the super shady, gossipy office lady who knows too much. And you can tell. Or the super duper helpful handyman, fix it dad grandpa who always, at any time, any day, for any problem, you call and you're like, oh my gosh, the light is out. A kid puked. We need to fix the toilet. Help. Um, both of those
Uh-huh.
characters are so dear to me.
Mm-hmm. I love how we all know all of these people.
Well, as we continue this adventure, let's check our sending stones, because some of you have already been casting messages our way. If you want your voice at this table, you can reach us at joycast@rollforjoy.org. That's roll, the number 4, joy.org. Or hit us up on social media. Now let's see what's come through the ether. From Dan via email. I'm a lay ministry associate in the ELCA, very much a Montana thing. As for location, I am in Montana, about an hour east of Glacier Park, so quite a ways to anywhere. I have been playing D&D since basic. Currently, I'm playing a game in 5e 2014 and DMing 2 others. For a small town, D&D and Magic are surprisingly popular. So I have the part of me that preaches and leads worship, and the part of me that games. Just wondering how to put those together into a ministry that I can get excited about. Thank you, Dan. Good question.
Yeah. So how do we do it? You get started. I mean, for me, I just started at a new congregation, and kind of brought this weird ministry passion over into a new space, and kind of a new community, and one of the ways that we got started and started in doing ministry is really 2 things. One was figuring out who are the people involved in kind of creating community around these hobbies already out there. So, both like D&D and Magic both have organized play scenes, and that might be at a game store. There might be, who's organizing the games? If you're in a small town, maybe who's the dungeon master in your small town? Maybe it's you. But who else? Start building relationships with those people. And because I think ministry really it's something that comes out of relationship. And that relationship is a real like first step. And then, then it's figuring out ways to bring people together, and then being intentional in how you do that, how you kind of set the table. So we started up, had some relationships that I built up with people in the community, and we hosted a big gaming day. Now we've hosted a couple that we were able to do using the church space, because we had space, and other people needed space to kind of come and game, and so we had a big gaming day, and we raised money. It was a fundraiser, so we raised money for Extra Life for children's hospitals, and that was just one little like one-off event that we were able to do pretty quickly, just by providing space to some gamers that were interested in gaming for good, and then we built partnerships with other folks, and started a local gaming community. So we've got a organized play games that are public and available, and we meet out in a public space. Out at a game store, and it's a ministry of the church that we're out there and creating community, and community that we make sure that is safe and is welcoming and is just really strong, and so we're creating fellowship around the table. So that's some of the tangible things that I've been doing in my location. But what do other people think about this question? How would you get started if you've got these passions and you want to do something? What else have you done or tried, or would you throw to Dan?
So this week we are doing Holy Rollers at Peace, which is super fun. So I just put together 5 DM binders of local people of faith who are DMs, who hopefully a couple of them can come. But during the summer, I go to a church called Prince of Peace, or I work at a church called Prince of Peace. And so we're doing these adventures throughout the summer. I said, oh my gosh, we've got to do a D&D adventure. The idea is just getting people from church together to do fun things. So, yeah, I put together a game, and it's from the 5-Room Dungeons, which Rory has recommended before. So really cool collection of a lot of homebrew games, and they're one-shots. And put it together for kids and teens, adults, and intergenerational. So there'll be 3 different games running the same campaign with slightly different flavor, and we're all going to be spread out in the big fellowship hall. And yeah, I'm just really excited to actually really specifically do D&D with people of faith. And everybody is someone who is known from the church, like mentors in the church, kids who are confirmation kids. And then at the end, we'll do a reflection time to talk about how faith showed up in some of those things and what was fun and what we might do next time. So we're actually going to do some D&D right at church, and it's going to be really fun.
Also been doing D&D right at church, Dan. I have been playing D&D with middle schoolers and high schoolers. I serve Our Savior's Lutheran in Rochester, Minnesota, and we had kind of a gap space in our programming for middle schoolers and high schoolers. It was like, hey, I like playing D&D, and I can DM, and we're just going to see if anybody wants to do it. And a number of the kids wanted to do it. So we've been playing D&D. I have a resource. I can't remember what it's called right now, but it has different Bible stories that you can play through. We've mostly worked through that, and we're going to do something different coming up in the fall. We're going to kind of create our own little world, and we'll see kind of how that works. And I think it's going to kind of dovetail a little bit with the other topic of our conversation for today, and kind of how we play that out as middle schoolers and high schoolers. One of the most interesting things of playing with them is, especially the younger ones, tend to be a little bit bloodthirsty. So you got to kind of rein them in a little bit as they're out there. They just want to get involved in all the stuff. So
yeah. I my approach was very similar to Rory's, except that I built the community first, and then they asked me what I did for a living, and I told them. And questions later on, as you build those relationships, you know, those relationships of trust, because that's something we've talked about, DMs and players. There has to be a level of trust between the two. And once you've had that relationship a while, questions start naturally coming up. Like, hey, you know, you do this, so what do you think about this or that? You know, these questions. And I would bring up these topics of faith would come up naturally, just because of what I did for a living as I DM. But the relationships had to come first. Once you have the relationships, then those kind of conversations can come out. But Rory is very, very correct in that. You have to build the connections and the relationships, the meaningful ones, and you can blend ministry in very easily.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the question, Dan. And just a reminder, yeah, you all can shoot us an email or hit us up on social media with your questions. And we love to hear from our listeners. Now it is time to get into the heart of today's quest, because every episode we take on a new main topic, and today it's this: how do I roll for discipleship? And to answer that question, we have the steward of lore of our little project Roll for Joy, Ben Loven, who has been with us at every single retreat that we've done, was part of the original campaign of pastors that I got together back in North Dakota over a decade ago, and was one of the first people that I recruited to play in that campaign, and played a character who was Leroy of the Clan Jenkins, and who has gone on to become an honored saint in the world of our campaign, which continues to this day. Last year, Ben started up a new endeavor, doing an actual play podcast with some other pastors down in his area around Rochester, Minnesota, called The Lore of Jesus, Roll for Discipleship. And in it, they take kind of the work of spirituality and weave it into the game. And Ben, how do you do that? Tell us what was the inspiration for this podcast, Lore of Jesus, Roll for Discipleship?
Yeah, the inspiration for it. It's kind of a couple-fold, and I can only take kind of half credit for it. The one of the other pastors who I play with, Carl Eric Gentis, he approached me and said, "Hey, have you ever thought about doing a D&D actual play podcast?" And I said, "I have thought a whole bunch about that and would love to do that." So he asked me, and I was ready to go. The kind of the inspiration for where we came out with, for the direction that we took with it, rolling for discipleship, is really this idea of discipleship and this question about it, of what does it mean to be a disciple, a follower of Jesus? And so we ran with that idea and took it to an extreme of what does it look like to be a disciple of Jesus in a world essentially where Jesus does not exist, which would be a fantastical world not on earth. And so that was the kind of the genesis for this, is how do we figure out what it looks like to be a follower of Jesus if nobody knows or cares about who Jesus is? And so we took some inspiration. The question, our backstory question tonight, is very appropriate because in the podcast, all of the players play as members of a church. 95th Lutheran Church is the fictional church that we've created, and they are churchgoers. They're all members of a church council, and they get pulled through a portal and sent into a magical world where everything is different, nothing's the same, and no one has heard about Jesus.
That is amazing.
So, yeah, it's a brilliant idea, and it is fun to listen to. How did you pull together the people around the table, and what was your pitch to them about why they should be involved in this?
Yeah, again, it was kind of a twofold thing with Carl Eric and I working this together. I was the DM, and Carl Eric was going to be one of the players, and he self-admittedly does not know how to play D&D, or at least didn't when we started. He played a couple times with me, so he was a real newbie to it, and so kind of gave a little bit of like a relational piece to folks who were listening who had no idea what D&D was about. He could kind of relate to them. But we started talking with people. I had a couple people that I wanted to ask, who I knew from our synod here, our Southeastern Minnesota Synod, and here in Rochester specifically, who played. And I essentially laid it out there and said, "Hey, we have this idea, this weird, crazy idea to play this scenario where you're a church council member who gets pulled into a portal, and the whole thing is about trying to figure out what does discipleship mean? What does it look like?" And people were really on board and ready to go. I tried to get kind of as much of a diverse group of folks as I could, because there's no benefit that comes from having 5 middle-aged white guys sitting around playing D&D together. And so we tried to have a broad spectrum of folks with different experiences who could come to the mix.
Is everybody a pastor in the group?
Pastors or church leaders, for the most part. Yep. So we all came with it from a certain perspective, and one of the balancing acts we had to do as we were in this is figuring out. You're going to play a church character, and so those stereotypical pieces that we bring out. I mean, we talked a little bit about it today, but like, how do you lift up a person without caricaturizing them? And I mean, we were not into this to denigrate people, to put people down, and to poke fun at people, but understanding that there are like you said, Rory, we know these people that we talk about, the coffee server, the curmudgeon with a heart of gold. Like, these are people in our lives that we know that seem to be at every church. And so how can we do that in a way that lifts them up? And all of the people that we asked were totally on board with that, wanted to live into these true characters, understand that they were actual people that they could imagine, and then really dig into what does it mean for this person to explore discipleship in an entirely different way than they have ever done in their entire lives, in a place where nothing makes sense anymore.
I really love that. So you've dropped these people into this world. How does character creation look like for that?
Yeah, so it was that was interesting. And I didn't want to railroad it too much. I wanted to let them be able to sort of create their characters. But first, I encouraged them first to create their church council character, and then to create their fantasy character. And it could be that they wanted to draw some inspiration from their church council character and sort of make their fantasy character a representation of their council person or an aspect of it, or just rolling the dice randomly and see what happens. We did have some fun with rolling a dice. So I set out this little mechanic where they had different discipleship practices, and I made a list of 20 different or 12 different ones, and they rolled a d12, and whatever that number came was their discipleship characteristic. And
what are we talking about? Give us some examples.
So it could be like likes to play music, or likes to spend time reading scripture, or likes to spend time in nature, or whatever. But I also put in there someone who does not eat meat, like vegetarianism as a discipleship practice. But then I also put in there somebody who only eats meat.
Right. I love that dynamic.
Specifically because Carl Eric is a vegetarian, and he is a theological vegetarian. He has a doctorate. It's really great. I love him to death. He's great. And I put it in there specifically for him. And wouldn't you know it, he rolled. His character was the one who only eats meat. But he went with that. He developed a theology of meat eating, of being a carnivore, essentially, a full theology about it. And he lived into that character. And over the course of the campaign, other things happened that made that an interesting dynamic for him. And I don't know. It's been out there for a while, so spoilers and everything. But I'm not going to spoil it. It's too good. He had to interact with that, and it was really fascinating and really wonderful. But again, all of them threw themselves into it. And if they used their discipleship practice, I gave them heroic inspiration when I remembered to, of course.
That's hard.
That's hard to do.
Yeah.
So what, as you have kind of worked to do what I'm calling a spiritually applied tabletop role-playing game, where you're taking aspects of faith and spirituality, not just like the culture of the church, but you're working in these ideas about like practices of discipleship, and how are you spreading a message that Jesus would be about in a world where Jesus is not there. And so what have been, I guess, how do I want to phrase this question? Not just what's your approach to that, but what were some of the things that you wanted to steer clear of, and what did you want to steer towards in that conversation, of working spirituality into the game, and what have you learned from actually doing it?
Yeah. There's a couple elements there. The first is why discipleship? I mean, yeah, it makes sense. If you throw people into a world that doesn't know about Jesus, how are you a disciple? That makes sense. But the real connection, the touchstone to our lives today is the reality that fewer and fewer folks actually in our world know or care about Jesus, right? Study after study shows the decline in the church for decades. So it's not an unfamiliar premise to us that there are people who don't know about Jesus. So like that number one was like, okay, this is something that we actually could relate. We can't relate to, wizards and dragons and stuff, but we can relate to the idea that fewer folks know or even care about Jesus. So how does that like interact in the actual gameplay? And I had to think about this for a long time, because it seemed like it would be a really boring story if like, oh, in the first arc, we're going to explore how we spend time in nature and how that affects our discipleship, or we're going to spend time learning how to talk to people about Jesus as a whole arc. Like that is not engaging storytelling. So I thought, well, if we have a world that is full of different situations, there are different crises going on, there's different political structures, there's a different faith structure, like what does it look like to just be in that world and have to interact with people and then see what bubbles up out of that? So the whole point of it was essentially a laboratory kind of a thing of how would we actually, if we decide that we are going to keep following Jesus in this world, how do we actually get along in a world, and what does that show us about our discipleship and living into that?
Were there, and I've listened to some of the podcasts and I can't quite remember, there were like aspects of divinity or holiness in the other world. Was that kind of like a counter religious experience, or was there kind of like a cohesive, like what was the cosmology within your world that you were holding up that they were playing within?
Yeah. Again, that was a question that I had to answer of what does faith look like? What do gods or lack thereof look like in this world? If we're going with the premise that it is like a parallel dimension to our actual world, where is our God in this alternate reality? And I ended up going with the idea that this world does not have a concept of a god or gods. They have what they're called the essences. And so these are like, they are supernatural beings, but they are not divine. They aren't worshipped by the people. Like this whole idea of worship is kind of a running question throughout the podcast. Like there's a question, like, what is this word worship? We don't understand what this means. Like, it doesn't mean anything to us. But there were essences of fire and water, earth, and air, the classic elementals, right?
Is it Captain Planet?
There is no heart. There is a fifth one, and it is the essence of flavor. And that essence's name is umami.
Umami.
Incredible.
That is so awesome on so many levels.
Ben, something that you said really caught my attention and was interesting with talking about the ongoing question of what is worship. And I really love the application. Like, I love what that's calling the players to do. And I love what that's inviting the listeners to do, in the sense of thinking about like, what are the essential and centering things? Like, what are the things that are adiaphora, the things that don't matter, the extra essential things? What are the things that we can create and play with? What are the things that we need to release that have been harmful? Where might the divine be moving in that? But I think it's such a relevant question for today, when so many people do not understand or value the concept of communal worship. We're really in a hyper individualized Western culture. And so this concept of engaging with God individually is spiritual and respected. But this idea of, why do we worship? Why do we worship collectively? What's the whole point? I try to like go for a moment in that in every sermon, to be like, and hey, that's part of why we do this, and we do this. And I love that you've created a story where that is built into it, and I hope that somebody will hear it and be like, "Oh, that's kind of cool, actually." Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
interested if you have more to say about that.
Well, and like, how do you even begin to describe worship to someone that doesn't even have a concept of divinity, right? Like this, what does this actually mean? I don't understand this language. I have no touchstone. Which that tied to that was the fact that our podcast is called The Lore of Jesus, and the characters mentioned Jesus's name maybe twice throughout the entire campaign. And we talked about that because at the end of every arc, which was 3 or 4 episodes long, we would stop and reflect and say, what did we learn about discipleship throughout this time? So we built in this time to theologize about what the story we just told.
And I think that was one of the things that I think makes this podcast different, like this aspect of it, that you play into this sort of action reflection model of spirituality, which is kind of a model of our engagement with spirituality, outside of just playing games. You can take that anywhere.
Exactly.
But yeah, those reflection sessions I thought were very, very special. What did you learn, or what did the players learn? Anything surprising or anything that stood out?
One of the things that really stood out was that these characters, because they did not know anything about this world, had to ask questions, and it just became part, without them even consciously being aware of it. They came into a new situation and they would just start asking questions just to get to know, to learn what was going on, learn a bit more about these people, and figure out what is going on in this particular place at this particular time. And we thought that is a real model for discipleship. If we get far more comfortable with asking questions for the point of learning about people and their experiences, not so that we can figure out how to respond, but simply so that we can learn, goes a long way on a road to discipleship and figuring that out. That was one of the main pieces that came together. The other piece was the fact that, again, and it worked as well as I could have hoped it would work, is even though they only mentioned Jesus like twice, the people in the world had an encounter with Jesus because these 4 Christians were being Christians in this world. They were being Christ in this world for the people around them. And so this idea that you can be a disciple simply by living the kind of life that you are called to live, even if you do not name it specifically, that is absolutely a valid form of discipleship.
I love that. A discipleship that is kind of draws you into the fullness of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Very cool.
So I have to ask, because you intimated it, but did you completely let them go into this campaign blind on lore and everything else on where they ended up?
Absolutely. They didn't want to know as well. Like, the players were like, no, our characters wouldn't have any clue, so we don't want to have any clue. So they learned the lore as their characters did. And it made it for a real stiff learning curve for them, because, again, like, coming into a whole completely foreign situation where you don't have any clue what's going on. They experienced it, and that truly, I believe, was part of this dynamic of why they were forced to ask questions, because they did not know anything, so they had to ask questions.
That's great. I love that.
I love that. It makes for, like, that's such a cool mechanic that it brings forward. I have heard it done in a very silly way that just brings forward shenanigans in Hello from the Magic Tavern, if any of you have listened to that one. where a human from the human world falls through a portal in a Burger King into a
That's
D&D
right. That's right.
world. And so he is constantly learning, like his whole thing is this series of interviews with all these really weird, magical, cryptid people who live there. But he's learning about the world and the people who are doing it. They're all comedians, right? And they're all doing
Mm-hmm.
it like improv style. And so they're all making up the world as they go, and then they have to remember all the lore each time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what a fun way to dig it deeper theologically by having it be like, okay, so the God.
Yeah, what's a God? What's discipleship? How does it all work together? It was another thing that sort of came out in it was and again, the people who are on this podcast were amazing at living into their characters. They had council conflict when they first got into the world, right? Like, people on councils don't always get along with each other. They have different ideas of how the church should go. Some people are on it, right? Some people are on it just because they got like strong-armed into it and couldn't say no. Some people are on it because they want to be on it. And so like they brought these conflicts into the world with them. And like there was, again, it was not like an intentional thing on their part. They just all lived fully into these characters and tried to imagine what this would be like. And they had conflict and disagreements about what should happen, where we should go, how we should do all these things. And then over time, those things mattered less and less and less as they got to know each other and got more comfortable with each other. And it was a beautiful, wonderful thing. Like, you can imagine, like, you know, taking people to like a high ropes course, right? Like the whole point is to put them in a stressful situation so they work together. This was high ropes in D&D.
Yeah. So, how did this go over in your congregations? You know, did anybody be like, "You that was me. You were talking about me in that," or
You're talking about me.
I don't know.
I have not had anybody say any comments like that. I have not had anybody tell me that they've had any comments like that. Because again, like they had sort of characteristics of folks, but again, like they developed stories around these people that, you know, diffuses the situation and makes it into their own unique person, even if they're pulling on some, tropes of folks that we know in congregations.
Nice. So if people are not part of, like, if they're not in on a congregation and know these stereotypes, what would draw them in to listen? Beyond like, here are my favorite people at church and they're going on an adventure and that's an interesting story. What are you hoping to kind of share with your audience through this?
The nature of sort of these council characters playing on church tropes, like the church is a community, and in any community that we're part of, there are folks. I would imagine that these similar characteristics for folks appear in communities all across the board, right? There may be something a little bit different about a church community than say perhaps the PTA, but again, you're going to have folks who are coming to whichever community you're part of who have passions and ideas, and they're coming either for a reason, whether it's a reason that they really want to be there or they just feel like they have to be there, or whatever the reason is. Like, you can find avenues of these people. We just happen to be all pastors, so we know church life, and that's what makes it something that is applicable. Plus, just the fact that we're trying to figure out what discipleship looks like. So why not have that be with church folks? I think as the campaign went along, as our season went along, it became far more than just being about church. And as we got toward the end, there was a full episode that and it ended up being a grief episode. So the idea that these folks came into this world and then spent a few months here in this world. One of the other pieces that I had them roll for at the beginning was their bonds. Like, who are you attached to? And those were part of the character's makeup. So like the idea that they are grounded in the real world, and what does that do to them when they get pulled into this other world? How are they feeling? What's going on emotionally and mentally? And so it came up a few times along the way of, oh, I'm really missing so-and-so. But there was an episode toward the end where they've been going for months from one thing to the next without really a chance really to process. They'd experienced a bunch of things. They had some triumphs and had some failures. And they got to this one point where all of that grief just settled on everyone. And we did not set out to make it be this. It just happened. Like I did not have in my notes of, oh, we're going to talk about grief today. It just occurred as it kept building on itself and building on itself.
Wow.
It was a deeply profound episode. And afterward, I had to go eat like a sleeve of Oreos just to self-regulate. Literally, it was that much of an emotional thing, and it was amazing because like they hit this episode, and it really was like almost at the very end, which to me felt really profound, of this idea of experiencing a depth of grief and frustration and not quite hopelessness, but like, does this even matter? Like, what are we even doing here anymore? And it was so close to the end. And they had to take that chance to process it and sit with it for a while and then move on. And then they got to the end, and it was a magnificent end. It was better than anything I could have planned because of how the characters played into it.
That's amazing. So what was the goal for them? Was their goal to get home, to get back?
Yeah, their goal was to get home. And so they had to, do the thing, find the MacGuffins and all that kind of stuff, typical stuff. I had to figure out how to structure this whole thing in a way that would make sense and for a story and keep us progressing along while we're having this big question of what does discipleship look like and who knows where it's going to go. And so that was a grounding thing for all of us to keep the campaign going. But yeah, the whole idea was that they would get the thing at the end and be able to go home. That was their one goal.
And did they do it?
Yeah, they did.
Spoilers.
Spoilers, but yeah, they did.
know.
Of course they did.
They did.
It wouldn't be a good podcast if they didn't.
They did. But I mean, if you're going to tune in and because you started recording season 2 now.
We have recorded episodes of season 2, which is going to start being released in early July.
Yeah, so coming out, this podcast will drop July 1st. So
this one will probably come out, and then a few days later, our first episode of season 2 will come out.
Yeah, go look for the Lore of Jesus, Roll for Discipleship, and do people need to go back and get the first season before jumping in? Is there going to be a lot, or what's the premise? Where does it go next?
Yeah, what are we working on for season 2? Season 2 is going to be a continuation of sorts. It is going to be all new council characters, but it will take place again. 95th Lutheran is going to be their home base, and they will again be teleported and transported into this magical fantasy world. It's the same world. Time will have passed, and we'll see where it goes from there. But again, the idea is to continue exploring discipleship, and these new council folks who, of course, know the other council folks from before. We'll see what has happened to the world in the years since. So it'll be an interesting trip to see. So, yes, you'll have a richer experience if you listen to the past episodes. But again, it's all new council characters. So if you want to just jump in with season 2, you fully can, because these new council characters, again, are learning all about this world and what has transpired in wholly new ways. That was WHOLLY.
Yeah.
But probably also HOLY.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So did they go in, are they going in intentionally, or is this like, oops, we got sucked into the portal again? Is that...
It is not intentional.
Not intentional.
Not intentional. Okay. Nope. You get drawn in unintentionally.
Okay, unintentionally. They the handyman dad grandpa forgot to patch the hole.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. Like, where's the handyman on that? Somebody's got to plug that hole.
Oh, if only it were that easy.
Well, Alex or Anthony, any last questions for Ben?
No, but I love the premise. I look forward to listening to season 2. The way season 1 ended was great. So I'm just excited to listen to season 2 when it drops.
Just thinking about anybody else who might be interested in starting something similar with a group of their friends, their church people, anyone like that. Any advice for people who might want to put together a actual play podcast or record a tabletop session?
I would say, again, doing an actual play podcast is different than just a regular session of D&D. Because playing a session of D&D, you are telling a story collaboratively. At least that's the way that I like to play D&D. Everybody is building the story together. And the same thing is true for recording a table or an actual play podcast. The difference is you are trying to tell a narrative, which maybe feels a little bit on the railsy. I will tell you, tabletop or actual play podcasts can go just as off the rails, just as easily as a regular session of D&D, because your characters can throw you for a loop. Specifically, there's one arc where all the players end up on a magical lighthouse. And I had in my notes a plan for if they won the fight that I knew was going to take place up on the lighthouse. And I had a plan for if they lost the fight that was going to take place on the lighthouse. I did not have a plan for if they just surrendered. And what do you think they did? Because they are church council members from our world going into a place fighting like people, like they had fought like air elementals before, right? But fighting actual people, they decided, oh, we wouldn't actually do this. So they said, sit down. So we sat down. In a regular D&D campaign, you probably would have a big old brawl fight, but they played into the story of their characters. And that moment changed the ending that I planned for this whole campaign, for the whole season. And the lesson I learned was trust your players to be who they are. And it was also a reminder for me for being a pastor of trust your people that they will be who they are. Being a pastor can sometimes feel frustrating. It can sometimes feel like I've said this so many times and it just feels like nobody's listening to me. But then you have a moment and you realize, oh, wait a minute, they've been listening the whole time. And before I even got here, they were listening and being formed in faith. And I didn't have to worry about any of this. They were going to be the people that God called them to be this whole time. So what am I worried about? Just act like they're going to be who they are. And that's who they're going to be. They're going to be the faithful people of God. And so yeah, that scene on the lighthouse went totally off the rails, but it helped me make a better ending for them. And I trusted that they would be those people, and they were in the end, and it was magnificent. So I would just say, like, if you're trying to do this thing, like, understand it's going to be different, but at the same time, like, trust your people that you have with you. And together you're gonna be awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your stories and being, going out there and trying something a little bit different with with recording this game and recording your laboratory of discipleship as you've been playing that out and sharing that with the world. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
Last but not least, every world needs its makers. This is Game Design Theopoetics, where we play creator for a moment and add something new to the canon. Today's creator is Ben. So Ben, what do you have to share from your design table today?
Well, I love making magic items. And so I've made a whole bunch of them. If you listen to the podcast, you'll hear a number of them. And I've made some new ones for season 2. And I debated about a couple different ones, but the one I'm going to go with today is a small ceramic figurine of a bald man. As an action, you can try to convince a target creature to insult it. You have to make a persuasion check, and the DC is determined by the creature's wisdom score. On a success, the creature will insult this item. 2 spectral she-bears will then appear and maul the creature, instantly reducing the creature to half of its remaining health. Then the she-bears will vanish, and the figurine will crumble. The target creature must have an intelligence score of 5 or higher and must be able to speak a language, otherwise this item has no effect. This is called the Bad News Bears.
The Bad News Bears.
That is possibly one of the coolest things I've ever heard. That is hilarious. That's amazing. I love that.
You've heard the song, right? The bears are eating my friends.
I have not heard that one.
No.
Female bears are ripping off my limbs. No, you haven't heard that one? Okay, we'll have to listen to the episode.
No, we have to see. You have to.
You bald head. We can play it when that item is being used. That is incredible, Ben.
That is great.
Well, for the Bad News Bears, you can check out our Instagram to see representation of that, and bring that. That is a powerful item.
I intentionally made it I didn't say it has to be a specific type of creature, but if it's Elisha calling down the sheep, that's power.
Well, that's it for episode number 8 of the Roll for Joycast. Join us next month when we talk about amazing artifacts and how to integrate items into your games. Until then, give us a rating, leave us a review, or reach out to us at rollforjoy.org. That's roll, the number 4, joy.org, where you can find links to all of our socials.
Now remember, folks, journey together.
Find the fun.
And hold on to hope. See you next time.